Welcome back to the main stage room. We're gonna get everyone seated so we can keep on schedule. Today is member marathon. Lots of tight scheduling. Cool. Hope everyone had a good time at the breakouts. If folks outside can make sure to come back into the main stage room, we're waiting for you. Great. Okay. Great. How are the breakouts? How's the, I didn't make it together. Good, small business tax? Okay. How many people were next door? Rough show of hands, okay. They covered a lot of ground, right? I could tell that one was gonna be intense for the prep call. And then yeah, here, the business case for breaking up big medicine, or the business case for independent medicine, I guess. Also very interesting. Okay, folks outside, I see you. Matt Stoller, we need you inside the room for the next panel. Author of Goliath. Has everyone met Matt Stoller? Yeah, he wrote this book, Goliath. It's popular. A lot of people come because of that. We're starting our next panel. It's another side project of mine, getting Matt Stoller to follow instruction. Anyway, okay. I think we're back. Back? Everyone's making our way in. Great. Cool. Okay. All right. So we have our next main stage panel, Making Things in America Matters. I think I got the title wrong before. These titles have shifted and then sometimes hard to keep track of what the new titles are. But anyway, Congresspeople, being Congresspeople, their schedules change a lot. And so we've had a little bit of a shift, but we're very excited to still have Congresswoman Debbie Dingell join us, but it will be virtually. So we're going to hear some virtual remarks from her live via Zoom. And then we'll get into the panel, and instead we'll have some pitch hitting on the moderation from our Rethink Trade Economic Literacy team member, Lori Wallach. And so we'll start with Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, and then we will get to the rest of the panel. So quick background for those who might not be familiar. Rep. Dingell is a stalwart champion for American manufacturing and industrial workers. She's long been one of Congress's toughest and smartest Democrats on trade policy, not to be underestimated. Not a lot of competition. Anyway, she predicted, in fact, that Trump's 2016-based trade politics, and she is the chair of the House Democratic Policy and Communication Committee and a senior member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. I think we can now cue Congresswoman Dingell. Yes, please join me in a round of applause virtually. Well, the applause is real. Everybody knows it virtually. Congresswoman, I will pass it to you for opening remarks.
Well, hello everybody, and I'm really sorry I'm not there, and that myself and my colleague are both coming to you from a telephone booth, and yes, they still exist in the cloakroom off the Democratic floor. So, I really wanted to be here because to be there, not here actually, because this is a subject that means a lot to me, and it's a very, very, very important subject, which is like making things in America matters. A truth that we've known for generations before we passed what I think we thought was one of the worst pieces of trade legislation in the history of this country, known as NAFTA. And I was not there. The man that I was married to was, but he voted against it. But we have decisions and policies that push us away from a focus on productive capacity and towards financialization and consumption, and we went to locating plants overseas, and it impacted us in many ways that people had no idea were going to come down the road. The choices that were made were not ones that I would have, but I think that we are now trying to fix it. What we have, the mess is not inevitable. And I think that there were not many good things about COVID, to be perfectly frank. But I think COVID did one thing and taught and actually showed Americans that we cannot be overly dependent on other countries. I can remember during COVID when none of us had masks or gowns or gloves, being on the phone in the middle of the night with someone I knew in China, sending them over to inspect product because we didn't know if there'd be quality, and the millions of dollars that we spend importing those when we need to. It's not only an economic security issue, it is a national security issue. And we cannot continue to be overly reliant on importing when what we need is that we need to have people here producing. We have too few makers in too few countries, and we know that we're really dealing with, especially one country, but some others in certain locations of the world, trying to make us all economically dependent upon them. And what we have to do is make more here and diversify the process. So the panel that you're going to hear from today, and I'm listening to Lori and going along with the flow as much as she is. But the panel that you're going to hear from today is going to address this issue in a myriad of ways. Chris, who's coming, I think we've been back and forth, how do we do this? There was no way to get there and to do these folks, is going to be coming to you from another conference in the cloakroom. But Chris is going to specifically address the resilience and economic well-being of our continental-sized country, and talk about how we need good paying quality jobs, and how we support them and help give them support, because 62% of Americans don't have a college degree, but they can make very good incomes and should, quite frankly, not insulting any of the lawyers in the room. I'm not sure we need another lawyer, but can you imagine getting by without an electrician, a plumber, many of the jobs that are so critical to all of this. And we need to, we need to policies that are going to support them and support our communities. Joe is going to be talking about national resilience, creating innovation, and developing generations of know-how and capacity. And Rush is going to be talking about national security. And what this panel is really going to do is, what do we need to be doing to get back on track? And I'm not sure, Lori, if I turn this over to you or if I ask Chris the question what I'm supposed to do, but I do want to say something to you. Tariffs are like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and tariffs can be a useful tool. And I say that when you're, like, I'm a car girl, and China is trying to destroy our auto industry, and we need to be producing on a level playing field. And when you're competing with a country that is manipulating its currency, subsidizing its production, using slave labor, that's just not a level playing field. But tariffs used chaotically make no sense and are creating chaos and increasing costs. So what we want to do is to stop the import of unfair goods. And the other thing is, we're competing when we talk about Mexico and our supply chain with there to other countries, we weren't competing on a level playing field there either, because they didn't have the same labor standards or the same environmental standards that we did. So tariffs are a tool in a toolbox, but the way they're being done right now is not helping our country, and I think we got to be honest about where they are good and when they're being implemented that they're not. But they have worked to revitalize manufacturing and rebalance our trade, but they have to be done with a lot of other policies and practices that we're going to start today. So, Lori, am I asking Chris a question, or are you taking this over now?
Congresswoman, this is Morgan, and I'm helping to MC. So we're going to hear some quick remarks. I'm going to do a quick intro of Congressman Deluzio, hear some remarks from him, and then we will turn it over to Lori to moderate. So if you both are able to stay on, you're welcome, I believe, to stay as part of the panel. Well, anyway, we're just going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Congressman Deluzio. Hello, Congressman. We're glad that you were able to join as well. He's been a strong partner of economic liberties for some time. He was elected on a platform that challenged corporate power in a purple district, specifically Pennsylvania 17. and he has carried that message into action. This spring, Rep. Deluzio wrote a prominent New York Times article challenging the Democratic Party's knee-jerk reaction to oppose tariffs, and has led the way on a populist agenda to use tariffs as a strategic tool to reshore manufacturing in defense of American workers. I'll turn to you, Rep. Deluzio.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Hello from a phone booth. As Debbie Dingell says, they still exist here on the floor. Imagine that. Sorry for the back and forth of our schedule. My Republican counterparts decided to hold a vote open for quite some time, but I'll jump right into it. And thanks for the introduction. Always nice to follow Congresswoman Dingell. Look, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. It's a place where I'm born and raised. I'm damn proud of the people who sent me to Washington, who I'm a part of. We talk a lot in my part of the world about hard work and patriotism and sacrifice. These are not just buzzwords, it is how we live our lives. And we are the people, like many across the country, who did a lot to build America. We made the steel that helped us beat the crap out of the Nazis and win World War II. Glass, I go on and on about our manufacturing, past and present. I say present because we are still a manufacturing powerhouse. And we and I believe the decision about whether our country is going to have a manufacturing base has a lot to do with what happens in Washington. It's trade, it's industrial policy, it's antitrust enforcement, it is, or the lack thereof, it's about pro-worker policies. All of those things together, to me, come into whether we are going to be a country that makes stuff. I think we have to be. I know that those can be tough, but really solid jobs and union jobs, for sure. And I'll start with just a basic value statement around our economy and manufacturing, right? If we are a place where hardworking people can take a shot at the American dream, you work hard and play by the rules, you can earn it, manufacturing jobs have to be a part of it. That also means that businesses taking a shot on American production lines need certainty, they need stability, and to be candid, as you heard Morgan lay out, me being critical of some in my own party's past with unlimited free trade, I'm also critical of President Trump's approach to trade, which has been chaotic, which has been sporadic, which has really hurt, I think, private investment in domestic manufacturing. So we got to do it better. And by the way, tariffs alone are not going to fix and supercharge American manufacturing. You got to have industrial policy, you got to have pro-worker policies, you got to have competition. I think the folks in this crowd understand the importance of a muscular antitrust policy as being a key component of this. And look, workers having more say on the job matters too. I cite the stats that won't surprise, I think, this audience. Last 40, 45 years or so, we've seen productivity grow nearly 3 times as much as pay. Workers are contributing more and yet getting less of a share of their profits. That's a problem for a lot of reasons, and one that I think we got to fix. So I'm happy to leave it there. I'll just say one other fact that matters. We also need workers who know and have the skills to do this work. And I love the apprenticeship programs I see, in the trades especially, but we also need to get that kind of programming back into the high schools. I think you hear it from educators, you hear it from manufacturers, you hear it from our unions. People have an appetite, they want to learn these skills. It's time to get them back into our schools. I know that's a part of this as well. So with that, I'll pause. I know we're in a weird environment. Debbie and I are here, but thanks for bearing with us. And Morgan, back to you.
Great, thank you, Rep. Deluzio. Round of applause for both of our members who are making it work online. And our video and audio team that's very, very agile. We appreciate you too. Okay, so if Rep. Deluzio in particular, if you could stay on for a second, I know Lori has a question for you. I'm going to get through the introductions of the remaining panelists, in addition to Lori, who really needs no introduction. She's going to be moderating. We're also honored to have Doshi, who is joining us. He's now a professor at Georgetown and director of the Council on Foreign Relations, China Strategy Initiative, previously served on the National Security Council, China and Taiwan director, and Joseph Ferrera, CEO and co-founder of Ferrera Manufacturing. Joe has built a thriving manufacturing business right here in the USA, and we are excited to hear his thoughts too. Welcome you both on stage in conversation with Lori, Rep. Deluzio, Rep. Dingell. It's all happening. Day 2 of the Anti-Monopoly Summit. Thank you.
I want to thank again the members of Congress, both of you for rolling with the punches, and everyone as well. It's wonderful we're able to still be able to hear from you guys, so thank you for the flexibility. And I have a question. In a way, it's for Congressman Deluzio, but I would love to also hear what Congressman Dingell thinks, which is, there is almost a generational thing, which is why I'm kind of picking on Deluzio, where there are a lot of people who were grown-ups when there was the NAFTA US, the pre-NAFTA US, where there were thriving middle-class factory towns all across the country, where the 62% of Americans who don't have a college degree were making things for their fellow Americans. It was a much more distributed system. There are a lot of small and medium-sized manufacturing companies, so there was more distributed political power as well. It's where our monopoly and our trade piece comes together. As Congressman Dingell said, those agreements came in, NAFTA, WTO, China joined the WTO, and really made a hell of it. And the hemorrhaging of those manufacturing jobs has had enormous social and political problems. So we happen to have two Democrats who get that working people across the country want, and we can have something different, and we're going to hear about how we can do it and why we need to do it from also a national security perspective. But I'd be really interested to hear from the both of you, members of Congress, about the politics of it, because in my experience, it is an issue that cuts across. And so this is a place where it's not left or right, but it's basically the very, very top and everyone else. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the politics of the populist economics of trade and manufacturing.
Well, I think you said you're picking on me, Lori, so I'll chime in, and Debbie, please feel free to come in as well. You started with generation of folks. I'm a millennial, so that gives you some sense of my age in the world. And my part of the world, Western Pennsylvania, as you heard me talk about, yes, we lost a lot of manufacturing, glass and steel in particular, but we still manufacture a lot of stuff. There are still great factory towns in my district. These jobs are not just some memory to people. They still exist. They aren't as many as they once were. But woven into our cultural identity and pride is what those jobs meant to people. What it meant to go work your butt off and have a union to have your back and be able to provide for your family. And that labor history is a big deal where I'm from, as are manufacturing jobs that are so much a part of it. And the towns that were anchored by those jobs, it was the lifeblood, and still is for so many, right? It was why you had the various churches and social clubs and union halls strong and vibrant. It meant a lot to a community. And so, yes, it's dollars and cents and jobs and livelihoods, but it's about dignity, it's about respect, it's about people seeing their hard work valued by our government. And the disrespect that comes, I think, from when our government and people in power don't respect it. And so I think it cuts across a lot of things. It means more than just a paycheck. It's a source of pride for people in the places where I'm from, and I'm sure Debbie will tell you the same about her part of the world.
Thank you for sharing that. And Congressman Dingell, you were there at the ramparts fighting NAFTA. And so with the two of you, I see really a generational looking forward also for the kind of America where we're making more things again. You are leaders in that fight. Thoughts on the politics?
Well, I like Chris, but let's just be honest. Unions built the middle class in this America, and I still think that they're the backbone of the American economy. We need more steel in this country. We have lost steel production, and that is not only an economic security issue, it is a national security issue. We need steel to build things, and we need to be building it here, not relying on another country. The whole politics of trade is upside down. I'm just going to be honest now. I told everybody in 2016 that President Trump was going to win, and I was like crazy and the enemy and a lot of other things, but it's because he understood how working men and women felt about their country. Everybody wants job security, and they were tired of seeing their jobs shipped overseas, and he knew how to talk about it. There are a lot of Republicans who I never thought I'd hear talk about the way Chris and I do right now. I think the politics of trade is upside down, and we're sorting out how we bring production back to this country. But at the same time, we've got to remember we're competing in a global marketplace, and I want to be able to sell the product we are building here overseas as well, because that's an important source of more jobs. So it's a complicated time.
Lori, can I say one more thing too on the politics here?
Please.
And look, certainly plenty of traditional Republicans were pushing an outsourcing agenda that I just think was horrible and hurt a lot of my communities and others. But there were also some on the left who were fine with people losing manufacturing jobs and telling them to go learn to code or some garbage like that. That is, I think, foolish and the kind of elitism that makes people feel like their work wasn't respected. That the value of a manufacturing job or a manufacturing business or entrepreneur coming in wasn't respected. I think that's a mistake, and I think the Democratic Party suffers from some who push that idea in places like Western Pennsylvania.
That is exactly spot on, and the Republican Party is shifting, and the Democratic Party hopefully will remember its NAFTA lesson. And I want to appreciate both of you for your leadership and your flexibility today. You're welcome to stay. I'm going to start bringing in our colleagues. If you need to go, I totally understand it, and thank you both so much. Let's have another round of applause for the members of Congress.
We're sorry for not
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. So, we just heard from Chris. People want to have a job that's dignified and make things, and we're very lucky to have Joe here, who is doing what people say you can't do. Making stuff, not just stuff, but clothing in America, in New York, in a union shop, and he's making a lot of it, and he's making money doing it. He's very successful. So what is the lesson? What is, from your perspective, how you're doing it, but also why was it important to you to do it here?
Thanks for the intro. My name is Joe Ferrera. The company is Ferrera Manufacturing. We've been in business since 1987. Yes, making clothes in America, not only in America, but in New York City, which has a great labor pool. Probably the proudest moment was just a year ago. So you saw that boat go down the river in Paris for the Paris Olympics, and there were 1,100 athletes on that boat wearing a really nice jacket. That jacket was made by us, and it was made by union employees, and it was made by people who live in New York. There's a certain pride to excellence, to making something fine, and you know it's fine. And every worker that we have knows good from bad. But in order to achieve excellence, you first have to be good. And in order to be good, you first have to be doing something. And so what we need to do in this country is that something. We need to manufacture just so that we're in the game. And anything we can do to get in the game tees us up to be good. Anything that we do well tees us up to be excellent. The game here is about manufacturing excellence. How do we achieve that? You can't achieve it just by policy alone, by tariffs alone. You have to achieve it by doing something really well and caring about it. We believe that deeply. So anything that spurs investment in manufacturing to get in the game in this country is a good thing. And if we plan to achieve excellence in manufacturing and have it be a viable sector, we first have to get in the game. And so my urging would be, let's get in the game. And there's plenty of us out there who are still left, who, guess what? If you're surviving now, it's because you're doing something right. And that something right is making beautiful clothes to a high level of standard, number one. Number two is you're doing something specialized and meaningful in the marketplace. In our case, it's fine tailored jackets. In other cases, it'll be great shoes. It'll be performance wear. It'll be those yoga outfits that we've talked about earlier before. But it'll be something meaningful in the marketplace, not just for the buyer of last resort, the US government, but also for the commercial markets. Let's find those markets. We've got the richest market in the world. We should be owning it here in our own backyard. And there are examples of that we're doing really well, but we need to do more of it.
So one of the most inspiring things I learned from and about Joe is this idea of the skills, the engineering, the prowess that you get by doing manufacturing. And I think a very both inspiring but instructive story is your company's COVID story and what you were able to do. Can you share that with some folks?
You know, COVID was an interesting time for everyone. We all remember the days that we learned about COVID. In our case, it was day 4 when the shutdown kicked in. And on day 4, we said, what are we going to do? We're making fine clothes, but my God. And the inspiration came from one of our employees. She came in and said, my son is working at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and he's wearing a garbage bag. And that just struck us so emotionally. We said, we need to get him out of the garbage bag and into some gear that's appropriate in a hospital environment. And we made our first 100 gowns. We turned over our machines and our operators, our workforce overnight, because a lot of people didn't come in, went from 135 people to 11 people making gowns. 11 turned into 20, into 50, into 80. We started making gowns in the hundreds of thousands for all of the city and for the nation. We then went on to make masks, and we converted all of our machinery from tailoring machinery into mask and PPE gear machinery. And we found ourselves at its peak making 1 million masks a week. 1 million masks per week. What's great about this story is one of resilience, adaptability. When you're in something such as manufacturing and you have the skill set and the employee set to make things, guess what? One day you're making a jacket, the next day you're making masks that's performing at an N95 level with the best material sciences in the world. We can do this. We can surge production. We can reallocate. We can pivot. We can do all of this if you're in the game. And so our COVID story was one about, national pride, national security, national emergency. Do we need something so dramatic? Do we need something so dramatic to shift our resources and wake up? I don't think so. It was a wake-up call for us, but one that was a little more subtle. It was one about, my God, we can surge so dramatically because we have the skill sets that no one else has, except peer manufacturers. We need more of us. We need more of us, not just for national security, but for areas that we haven't even thought of yet. For the next crisis, I don't think we need a crisis to wake up. We don't need a crisis to wake up. And by the way, when you're a maker of things, you just love making things. And so it becomes infectious. There's an army of people in our country, that 62%, we want to capture. Probably the happiest moments I have is when we hire a new engineer that's looking at triaxial machinery to work new sewing techniques and innovation to make a beautiful collar. These engineers are excited to actually take their engineering talent, put it in the field, not ship it off somewhere and say, oh, I designed something that I'll never see. An engineer in apparel gets to design something and see a pocket, see a lapel, see a jacket, see a hoodie, see a physical thing go from an idea and a concept to a physical thing of beauty. It drives dignity, it drives pride, and guess what? There's real economic impact for that person. So our group of hires, we're anxious to hire the 62% of Americans who want to make beautiful things. Not everybody likes to make beautiful things, but at least when you look at an article and say, that's a jacket, don't just look at it as a consumer saying, that's a thing that I buy. Look at it as a person saying, that's a thing that we make.
So the ability to make stuff we have, the more we do it, the better we get. But somehow we still need to be convinced that we should be making more stuff here. And obviously COVID was a wake-up call, so that shifted it. But there is another phenomenon that's going on simultaneously, and that is where I'd like to bring Rush in, which is Rush came to this focus on why it's important to make things in the US from a very different perspective. He is an expert, PhD on China and Taiwan. He was in the National Security Council. He was the China director. And from his perspective, there is a basic national security and sort of subset of that resilience reason that we simply need, not just to be able to, but to be doing more domestic production. What do you think, Rush, are the sort of key lessons of, in your field, how we do seem to see a little bit more of, on a bipartisan basis, a focus on needing to make things here, but what are the gaps that keep us from getting there?
Well, thanks, Lori. And just hearing Joseph's tale about how manufacturing is working in America, in New York City, is pretty inspiring. And you think back that across American history, there was a time when lots and lots of companies like Joseph's were spread around the country, as you were alluding to earlier, Lori. And the rise of America was in part a product of that dispersed manufacturing around the country. You see that kind of dispersion today in one place, which is China. But it used to be an American story. And I think we forget that the rise and fall of countries like America is in part a product of whether or not you can make things too. It's a product of scale. And right now, the first leaders in manufacturing were the British, right? They had the steam engine. They're very excited about that. They used that to imperialize the world. But they always knew that ultimately others were going to be able to catch up. And if they had a bigger population, if they had a bigger continental scale, they could put the Brits out of business. And that's kind of what happened. The US, Russia, Germany, we all became manufacturers too. We were a little bit later to the party, but we were quite good at it, and we were able to outscale them. And that sense of daunting scale is what built America's victory in World War II. We all know that it was our ability to outproduce the Axis powers that was critical to our success. And you don't have to, look at a history book to know that. You can also read what, our adversaries were saying back then. If you read what Adolf Hitler said about American manufacturing, he was terrified of it. He was in awe of it. Yamamoto, who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor, thought that he could run around wild in the Pacific for 6 months, but eventually our industrial might would catch up to him. So that's why manufacturing is the hinge upon which history sometimes turns. But let me add to that, because today, that kind of manufacturing scale is found in China. And just a few statistics to give people a sense of why this is such an important issue, whether you're looking at it from a domestic policy perspective or a foreign policy perspective. China right now, value add, is 2 times U.S. manufacturing capacity. It's 2 times U.S. power generation, 3 times American car production, 13 times American steel production, and 20 times American cement production. But don't stop there. I mean, if you look at the share of what they possess in the markets we care about, not just relative to us, but relative to the world, it's enormous. Right now, they are essentially half of all world's chemical production, 50% of all shipbuilding in the world, 3/4 of all electric vehicle production, 3/4 of all battery production, 80% of drone production, 90% of solar panel production, 90% of EV production, of rare earth magnet production, 90%. So why does this matter for us, right? It's not just because we want to be prosperous. It's not just because we need to get in the game so companies like Joseph's can learn how to do these things and spread that knowledge throughout our economy, but it's also for our national security. So let me end with this. There are 3 things that kind of worry me about our lack of a sufficient industrial base. The first one is that, God forbid, there's a conflict one day, including with the PRC or with someone else, and we can't manufacture what we need the way we used to be able to do that to stay in the fight and keep our people safe. The second possibility is like COVID, but there's a lot of other things like COVID that could happen to us. Natural disasters, cyber attacks on our critical infrastructure. Any of those disasters is going to require us to be able to surge in the manufacturing sector to make sure people have what they need. Yeah, you can do stockpiling, you can do good inventory management, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to produce it in America. And if you can't do that to some degree, you're going to be at a disadvantage if there's a crisis that affects the whole world. And finally, and we saw that with COVID especially, but finally, let me just say that there's also the risk, the very real risk of coercion. And we're seeing that right now, right? Right now, we know that President Trump has been willing to trade away some of America's biggest high-tech exports and products, our most advanced magical chips. And he's willing to trade them for 1980s era technology, which is called a rare earth magnet. Our automakers need it, our manufacturers in a lot of sectors need it. If they don't get it, they shut down. But we stopped making it. We, in fact, sold the capital equipment that used to make it to China, and we taught them how to make it too. All those trained engineers that Joseph was talking about that we had in this country, they went overseas and helped other people become trained. They didn't help other Americans become trained, and today we can't make those magnets, and we're willing to trade away our best technology for technology that is 4 decades old. And tomorrow it could be something else. 90% of our fermented antibiotics, which are a manufactured product, they come essentially from China. Fermented API is what it's called. It comes through China, by and large. If you take an anticoagulant drug called heparin, you use it for an IV. Yeah, we had a healthcare panel just a minute ago which talked a little bit about China. If you use it for an IV, if you use it for kidney dialysis, you need this, but almost all of it comes from China. So there are real supply chain risks for us that could be the product of, or they could be rather the site of Chinese coercion if we don't get manufacturing back. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I think Joseph's story is very inspiring, and we should have more stories like that throughout this country, and we need to figure out what kind of policy makes that possible.
So one of the questions that always strikes me is, because you were just in the Biden administration, as people are waking up to both the possibilities and new inspiring stories that make people remember what we can do, but also the perils, and we are in a continental-sized country, rich with natural resources and brainy people and lots of diversity, which, if we were a little tiny country, we didn't have that opportunity, but it's not. We are what we are. What has been the gap between, in the Biden administration, they kind of got it, they did those supply chain studies, and the thing happening? What are the problems? What needs to be overcome?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and really, being able to reindustrialize America, being able to revive America is a relay race. The torch has to be passed from one team to the next, across administrations, from the executive to Congress and back again, and to all of you. And I think that there's probably 4 things that come to mind for me that are kind of impeding more progress in this area policy-wise. The first is old thinking persists, right? I mean, The Economist magazine just had a cover a few months ago which said that basically manufacturing was like a delusion, that it was important, that was crazy. And I was surprised that they came out and said that, because I think everything of the last 5 years has proven that that's not true, whether it's making weapons, making medicine, making rare earth magnets, all of that shows the value of the material economy. But old thinking persists, and it has impact on policy, it has impact on legislation. I think the second thing is that we are, as Congressman Dingell mentioned, we're also competing in an international environment that is challenging. So we need to reindustrialize, but part of reindustrialization means being able to compete in international markets. But we're not able to do that very well because we have historically a very low tariff rate, and a lot of our competitors have a very high tariff rate. So we can't sell into those countries. But even when they do lower their tariffs, they're doing it after we've lost a lot of our industry. And right now, what we're trying to reindustrialize in an environment which is unlike any environment we've had in a long time. It's an environment where one country, China, has more than 30%, maybe 35% of global manufacturing value add, one country. And that means that there's just that much more competition to break in. So that's the second part. The third part is being able to find a way to break in, being able to give companies like Joseph's a chance requires good state policy. That requires state capacity. Any country that's trying to break back into the manufacturing game over the last 200 years has had to do that against entrenched incumbents. And they've often had to do that with a little bit of help from the state. Whether that's help with permitting, whether that's help with industrial policy like investment, whether that's help with capitalizing the university so you've got good researchers who can become the engineers that someone like Joseph will hire. But we don't have that capacity yet, and right now we've been hollowing it out. And Congress, let's be frank, is an appropriation-starved environment, and we're elected to contribute the capital we need to some of these challenges. Even when we do industrial policy, we don't always do it right. We can talk more about that. And finally, we have to invest in the American people, right? Workforce, training, the transfer of tacit knowledge, all the things Joseph talked about. And a lot of that investment doesn't happen at scale. But if you put these 4 pieces together, I think it is possible for us to get back in the game because, as you said, Lori, we're a continental-sized country. We are the world's second biggest manufacturer, even though we're only half the size of China. We're still, per capita, doing better than in manufacturing. We are good at high tech, and here's the other thing we've got. All of our allies and partners are also phenomenal manufacturers. And one thing that President Trump has been able to he's been trying to do, but he's been failing to do it, I think, as well as he could, is get those countries to set up factories in America, to invest in the United States, and transfer some of that knowledge to American workers. But if you do that, Taiwan builds your chip plants, the Koreans help you build shipbuilding, the Japanese help you build batteries, and so on down the line, you can actually find a way to jumpstart American manufacturing with a little bit of help from your friends.
You asked what is the gap. I see this time right now as being an extraordinary opportunity, and an extraordinary opportunity to reindustrialize in a way that didn't present itself 10 years ago. We don't frame it as bring back and the good old days and a retro concept of what was. It's actually bring forward. And bring forward, our base has been so decimated that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to rebuild in a way that was not present 5 years ago. AI and robotics, these 2 technologies, these are transformative technologies. We see especially the apparel industry and the textile industry as gateway industries to adopt these technologies, bring them into the fold, and jump over the competition. And in doing so, what do? We train a workforce capable of harnessing these incredible technologies. robotics are not new to us. I've got over 70 robots in our factory right now. They're not the robots that you think of as being humanoid and moving large particles, and they are little tiny robots that lift spot buttons and bring them over. They're automatic spreaders that lay textile on their own with optical readers. There's technology that we've adopted, and apparel and textile is an industry. It's not the only industry, but it happens to be one that adopts quickly, installs quickly, and can provide and train the workers that we need to run the industries that we think are the ones that we have to win, in which we have to win. The opportunity right now to drive technology, and here's the gap. The gap is to say the winning industries are. No, the winning manufacturers are the ones that are going to train the workforce that we need to dominate and be the industrial power that we were, that we will be again, but in a way that's different because we're driving technology that was not here 10 years ago. We see this on the ground. It's inspiring on the one hand, and it's also concerning on the other that we're going to miss this window. We can't wait 12 years for this opportunity. It's actually right now.
I was going to ask you that very question, which you answered before I asked it. So while you are thinking, both of you, about sort of the speed round of what are 2, 3, 4 things that specifically you would want a president, a Congress, the local community college to be doing to maximize our chances of being able to produce in the U.S. more stuff, and I want to drop a footnote, the trade part of this, diversify the supply chains that we have so we're not so over-reliant. You guys think about that while I just drop one factoid, because we're here talking about concentration of corporate power. And the thing to think about of how, in a way, the current corporate-led globalization regime, kind of hijacking the good name of trade agreements, has led us to a place where we're making too many things in too few countries, in too few facilities. And so just everyone think about this. At this moment, we have such imbalanced trade, China's a big part of it, but not exclusively, that there are about 23 countries that have chronic, large trade surpluses. They have rigged up policies that they're always sending more manufactured stuff out. And I'm not talking the natural resources countries. So I've taken Botswana's diamonds and Norway's oil out of there. I'm talking about the manufacturing companies. Here's a surprising one. Germany's number 2. China by far is number 1, but Germany's got some tricks up their sleeve. And then we have a $1 trillion chronic trade deficit, biggest by far. But brace yourselves. There are 67 other countries with chronic global trade deficits. It's the global trade deficit that's important. The bilateral ones, not as critical. Global surpluses, global deficits. So obviously something that imbalanced. You're not going to get the many benefits of trade. And in that deficit block is India, Brazil, Mexico. So not the countries you would expect. In that are potential partnerships for supply chains, where basically the country's not playing by any kind of a fair rule can be told either clean it up or stay out in the cold. Different conversation, different panel. But just think of that imbalance as we think about what is the structure we have to operate in. And, gentlemen, those 3 or 4 things are?
You first, Joseph.
Oh, I love these open-ended questions. So the community colleges, the 62% number, can we just take the 62% and can we wake the community colleges up and say you shouldn't be a 4-year college, we've got enough of that and it's expensive enough. And by the way, they were talking about earlier that those who graduate with 4-year degrees, we have enough lawyers. We also have enough baristas with 4-year degrees. So there's a missing piece here. This is to the gap question. What I'd really like to see, because it excites me so much, is an associate's degree in engineering. Instead of having 10 of them, let's have 1,000 of them. These engineers are great. This technology gap that we're talking about right now is one of implementation. Engineers, so we reach out to the schools, to LaGuardia, to CUNY system. These are community college-based organizations in New York City area. And you've got these kids who are so excited to make a pocket flap. And that just makes me excited because that's the future. Can we multiply this by thousands? So I think the community colleges need to see the opportunity to have welding programs, trade programs, plumbing programs. We don't want to be a country where we order an IKEA thing and we have to call a guy up to put it together. Come on. Let every household should have at least one person who can pull out a screwdriver, fix a leak, and put together a piece of furniture. All of our workers, and they're 85% women, by the way, can put together a piece of IKEA furniture. And they didn't go to a community college. How much more powerful would we be with community college support? And there was a comment earlier about driving it down to the high school level. I completely agree with that. Let's expose at the junior high school level that you can actually do things, make things, and celebrate the trades. It's not a second option. It should be considered a prime option, one among many. And so education is the long play, but I think we can activate it sooner than 10 years. Let's activate it now. So that would be one big ask for me.
And that diffusion of power, obviously, politically, is part of that story of having many more people empowered in the economy, and then having the power to have agency over their political futures. Rush.
Well, that's a great answer, and I was going to say something about education as well. I had a chance to visit with Austin Community College's effort to sort of build and scale a massive program to help their graduates enter careers in manufacturing in the area. It's a very successful program, and I think it's useful to see programs like that, because while there is a lot of bad news in the U.S. economy, there's also these spots of excellence and good news. And the question for American policy is, can you take those good spots and scale them across the country? But let me offer, since Joseph already eloquently spoke to that, two other thoughts. One domestic, one international, both hopefully relevant for reindustrializing the country. On the domestic side, there was a bipartisan push, not really a push, but advocacy for something like an industrial investment bank, something that would create a patient capital, maybe $1 trillion of appropriations stand it up or something insane like that. We spent a lot more than that on COVID recovery. And you'd be able to use that to basically fund, reindustrialization across the country. Not all those investments would pan out, but if you look at the scale of what other countries do, the countries you talked about, Lori, that are chronic surplus countries, they have stuff like that, institutions like that they use to break into the international global economy at the expense of others. I'm not saying we have to fight fire completely with fire. We have unique American characteristics, but an industrial investment bank is one good domestic solution. You could consider it. It's interesting. Even people like Vice President Vance and Senator Josh Hawley have supported this idea along with folks on the left. So maybe there's a bipartisan angle here down the road, just not yet. And the second thing is international. I do think that we have to get some of those countries that are surplus countries, but especially those debtor countries, the countries that are importing a lot more than they export, together. And part of the way we can get them together is to talk about China. Because Germany is a big exporting country, but it's also getting destroyed by China's excess capacity or China's manufacturing. They just fired, I think, about 100,000 manufacturing workers in the last 6 weeks alone. And if you scale that to America's population, it's like 300,000 to 400,000 jobs, essentially, in our context, and they just lost that in 6 weeks. So I'm not sure how much longer they're going to be an exporting country. I'm not sure how much longer any of these countries, Japan, Korea, with the exception of perhaps Taiwan, are going to stay in that game. So we do have an opportunity. So what's the solution? I think it's basically to find a way to build a bit of a moat, a bit of a wall around our collective economies. They can keep out the distortions from China, but allow us to trade a bit more freely with each other, with some relevant areas where we make adjustments for our domestic situations and the needs of our own industrial bases. And that kind of approach is a throwback to an earlier era. But what it lets us do is build scale to match China, not scale in just America, but scale across allies, or allied scale. And if we're able to do that, and I think a lot of these countries like Germany and Japan, who were reluctant to do that in the past, might be more willing to consider it in the present. If we are able to do that, we have a much bigger market we can all sell to. Our companies have much bigger markets that they can benefit from, and that capitalizes more manufacturing. So I think it's a domestic story, it's a human capital story, but we cannot forget it's also, to your point, Lori, what you work on, it's an international trade story, it's a financial flow story, it's an international economic story too. You've got to align the domestic and international policy if you're going to be able to do something like reindustrialize the country.
Thank you both very much for those insights. I think we have time for one question. If we have one quick question to come from the audience, I think we've heard how you can do it, that we need to do it. Does someone have, I see right over here is a hand.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Christina. I love this panel on manufacturing. I'm Korean. Korea grew on manufacturing. I think no rich country can say they got rich without manufacturing. My question is going to be a little bit, maybe throwing a little bit of spice in, because it's on the top of my mind after the ICE raid on the Hyundai factory that was supposed to bring 8,000 jobs to Georgia, right? When you're with allies, ultimately is bringing, let's say car manufacturing, right? Is bringing car manufacturing back to the US ultimately at a global scale a zero-sum game? Is it that more car manufacturing jobs for Americans means fewer for Korea? They are getting fired, by the way. They are losing their jobs in Korea. So like, how do you kind of wrestle with that? You know, to your last point where you said like building that moat with allies.
So just to summarize the question, our colleague who is from Korea points out that this recent raid on the Georgia Hyundai plant, which is a construction raid, but that plant's supposed to create thousands of jobs in Georgia, and workers in the auto plants in Korea are now being laid off. Is it a zero-sum game? If we expand production here, does that mean someone else is going to lose? And I have some views on that, but let me go, gentlemen, to you guys first.
It may very well be a zero-sum game, but we want to make sure, to the point made, that the winners of that are the block of nations that join hands, and it's not China. I'm going to make it a short and sweet answer. If it is zero-sum, we want the benefit to accrue to friends and allies, not to China. They are an enemy.
I'll just quickly say, I agree with Joseph that the idea is that those within the club, so to speak, benefit. So I don't think Korea has to suffer, because right now one of the things that Korea is facing is competition from Chinese car manufacturers who could put Korean companies out of business. So it really is sort of the Ben Franklin adage: if we don't hang together, we're all going to hang separately against the world's most formidable manufacturing power since us. You know, we were 40% of global manufacturing a century ago. They're 40% today. Nobody has been able to get there. So I think it's positive sum from the perspective of our group if we're able to manage that market share vis-a-vis China and bring it back to this club. And as for that raid in Georgia, that was a disaster. I mean, Korean companies are thinking, why should they bother investing in the United States if we're going to be ham-handedly putting people in chains, even though they're here to help transfer technical and industrial and tacit knowledge to American workers down the road? That's an own goal. I think even the president realized it when he tweeted kind of his version of an apology of it over the weekend.
And before turning the mic over to Morgan, I just want to add to that from a slightly different lens, which is if you think about the question of who are the winners and losers, if we had production more distributed and we had it with higher wages and better quality, you'd have more people around the world able to buy the things that they are making and or to trade and buy things that they want that other people paid a decent wage are making. And so part of the question is one actually of competition and distribution, which is right now we've got a situation where a lot of the things we're buying are being made by people who can't possibly buy them. I mean, just, you know, another shocking stat, AALP is about to release a study on the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, 5 years of its labor rights chapter. The wages in Mexico are still lower than in China. So people in Mexico are making tons of top-end cars. We're paying the same price for that GM car, whether it's made here or it's made in Michigan. And yet, the workers there can't even buy a damn motor scooter, much less the dang car. So we would not be having to worry about workers in other countries being basically out on the curb if more people could actually be consuming. Now, obviously, for every environmentalist here, they're carrying capacity issues, I get it. But we don't have to have them. The future of, you know, solar and of e-vehicles, there's a way in which basically having things made so more people are actually having a stake and can contribute and participate and are empowered as consumers and as democratic participants is the way forward, whether we're looking at the global economy or our national economy. That's our way forward. And with that, I want to turn the mic back over to Morgan. Thank you all. This panel was fantastic. Thank you, audience.
Round of applause for the flexibility of our panel. Lori is moderator on the fly. It is helpful when you're a trade expert to freestyle and moderate a trade and industrial policy related panel. But yeah, well done. And I do want to underscore, it came up in the panel, but all of these ideas and having the state and having a functional industrial policy do require a government that is trying to support Americans and build our economy, and that would be a great thing to have. So, okay, before we go to our coffee break, we want to take a second and acknowledge that the Anti-Monopoly Summit never is possible without the work of all of our great partners who bring contributions both for this day and over the course of the year to support our understanding of different market areas, industry.